The story of Job is a good story. It has important lessons for us. Although the bulk of the text was probably written 400 to 700 years before Christ was even born, it's still relevant for us today. In fact, it challenges us. But before talking about that, I feel that maybe I need to give some background information to help clarify some misconceptions about the story. You see, it's often viewed as a showdown between good and evil. We can almost imagine the curtains rising with God dressed in white as the champion of all that is good and right, taking center stage. God appears to be having a social gathering with all the heavenly hosts, and the villain Satan crashes the party, no doubt wearing black, and intent upon doing his best to undo the goodness of God. It would be nice if life were that simple. It would be nice if we could label everything as either good or evil. The good we could attribute to God, and the evil would be relegated to Satan. But life isn't that simple. Instead of the black and white of fairy tales, in reality, there are thousands of shades of gray in which we spend most of our lives. For example, the character in this morning's story, which goes by the name of Satan, is actually much different than the way most of us may perceive him to be. He's not the villainous character that most of us have been taught. You see, the Hebrew word to describe him is not a proper name, but rather a job description. The word for him is not Satan, but actually Ha-Satan, which means the accuser, the adversary, or the prosecutor. Our story's setting is not a heavenly cocktail party, after all, but rather a divine court of law. God is portrayed as the defense attorney and judge, and the heavenly being we have come to know as Satan is actually the divine court's chief prosecutor. In Judaism, and this is a Jewish story, Ha-Satan does not make evil, but rather points out to God the evil inclinations and actions of humankind. What is often overlooked but cannot be ignored is that the Satan functions as the adversary on God's behalf. After this introductory section of the book, the Satan never makes another appearance, is not mentioned, questioned, or in any way signified. It is God who is questioned, represented, and significant. In other words, God is the one who is in control. I make this point about our image of the Satan not to challenge or undermine anyone's preconceptions, but because I think if we get bogged down with the wrong thinking and believing about the Satan in this story, we are liable to miss the primary concern of Job. You see, this is not a story about the battle between good and evil. And it's not an explanation about why bad things happen to good people. Instead, one of its morals is found in Job's response to his wife when she encourages him to simply end his misery by cursing God and dying. He replies by saying, "Shall we receive the good at the hand of God and not receive the bad?" It's not a story about why good things or bad things happen. Rather, it's a story about how we respond in the face of those things. Most of us prefer a simplistic theology that says good things happen to good people as their reward and bad things happen to bad people as their punishment. We've got our own ideas of what is fair and what is unfair, and we firmly believe that God needs to play by our rules. In this morning's first reading, the 26th Psalm, the psalmist makes a plea to God for justice. Most of the psalm is taken up with the psalmist saying what a good person he has been. He refuses to sit with those people who he has decided are wicked. In fact, he hates their company. He reminds God that he washes his hands in innocence, sings songs of thanksgiving, and tells of God's wondrous deeds. In fact, a large portion of the psalm is dedicated to describing what a wonderful person he is. And so God needs to be good to him in return. Clearly, the psalmist is not of the same mindset as is Job, who asks the question, shall we receive the good at the hand of God and not receive the bad? Job understands that life just happens. If I fall off the ladder while painting the house, it's not a punishment from God. Instead, it probably means that I wasn't as careful as I should have been. Maybe I got distracted. Maybe the shoes I chose to wear were slippery. Life happens. If I lose half my investments in the stock market, it's not a sign from God. It's the same thing that happened to everyone else who invested in stocks. Life happens. The increase in weather-related disasters over recent years is less likely to be God's punishment and more likely to be a result of global warming. God isn't destroying the Earth's ozone layer. We are. Life happens. God does not cause HIV. A virus does. We can't blame God for the artery blockage that causes a heart attack if we aren't eating right and getting the right exercise. God doesn't cause the cigarette smoker to get lung cancer, the overeater to get diabetes, or the workaholic to develop ulcers. We are more responsible for our health than we would like to admit. We take our chances and life happens.